Hey everyone, today we're going to be learning about the different types of selection in edit mode to expand your Blender modeling skill set. As this one will be quite an extensive list, there is a free PDF guide included which will go over most of the hotkeys you need to know. Today you don't need to worry about trying to memorize everything, but these are more things to start building your familiarity with these different selection types, and you can always refer to them in the PDF guide whenever you get stuck with something. To start off, we're going to actually need an object. So to add an object in Blender, we can just press Shift A, and then under mesh, I'm just going to choose cylinder today. Then to go into edit mode, we just press tab. If you're new to using edit mode in Blender, one of my last tutorials goes over this in more detail to get you started with modeling in Blender. First thing you need to know about selecting things in edit mode is at the top here, as I briefly mentioned in one of my last videos, we have the different types of selection modes. So the first one here, which we can access by pressing 1 on the keyboard or by left clicking this button here, will take us into Vertex select mode. Now when I left click one of my points here, you can see I can select these individual points. These points are called vertices, and they are the individual points which make up the edges, which make up the faces of our object. Then with 2 on the keyboard, we can go into edge select mode. And now when I left click, you can see I can select individual edges. Finally, we have 3 on the keyboard, which is face select mode, and that allows us to select individual faces like this. We can also select multiple by holding down the shift key and then left clicking, so now we can select multiple things at once. With that recap out of the way, let's move on to the next step, which is talking about this select box tool. This works the same way as the select box in object mode, and pretty much you can just left click and hold to drag, and it will select everything within your box. Notice how everything at the back here is still unselected. If we want to select everything through our object as well, we can come up to the top here and left click this X-ray button. Notice how my object will become transparent, and now when I left click and drag over my cylinder, you can see it will select everything, even the things through the object. I'll turn off my X-ray just now, and to deselect stuff I can just left click away from my object, and that will deselect all my faces. I'll left click and hold this, and you can see we've got a few different more tools here, such as select circle, which allows you to select things, and we have lasso select, which allows you to left click and hold draw to select things. I'm not going too in depth into these because I did cover it in a previous tutorial, so if you want to learn more about these tools here and also these buttons up here, I highly recommend checking out that video if you haven't already. The hotkey for quickly accessing the circle selection tool with C is still functional in edit mode as well, and it works just the same as in object mode. So now I've pressed C, I can left click to select things, and once I'm satisfied with my selection, I can just right click to get rid of it. This is much easier than having to switch in and out of it from this menu here. Now if I want to select everything in edit mode, all I need to do is press A. I like to think of it as A for all, and I mentioned before we can select away from our object to deselect everything, but there's a handy hotkey as well, and to really make sure you've deselected everything, you can hold down Alt and then A. So just think of it as resetting the selection to nothing. So Alt A for deselect all. Something else to know about object mode and edit mode is you can actually add additional objects inside of edit mode, although these won't be a separate object but rather additional mesh inside our cylinder here. So I could press Shift A for example, and I could left click cube for example, and press G and X since all my faces are selected. Do keep in mind if they're not selected then it won't move, and I'll left click it to save it there. You can see if I press tab to go into object mode, I can't select these objects individually because this cube was created inside of edit mode of this cylinder. So technically this cube is part of the cylinder. I'll press tab to go back into edit mode for now. I can still press A to select everything, but if I want to just select my cylinder, then I would need to use a different form of selection. So either I could select everything manually, or I could hover my mouse over my desired object and just press L. I like to think of it as L for linked selection. And this will select everything which is connected together in the mesh. So since these two objects aren't connected together, it won't be selected. You can press L again, and you can see it's just going to continue to select things. You can also remove a linked selection by pressing Shift L, and you can see that's going to deselect that object. To further demonstrate how this linked works, I'm going to quickly do something which I don't want you to follow along with. I'm just going to left click this face here and then shift select one of these faces here. Then I'm going to press Ctrl E and choose bridge edge loops. Don't worry about what any of this is doing just now, but all I want you to know is that pretty much I've connected these two objects together, and so they're now united. If I now press L, you will see it will select everything, and that's because this cube and this cylinder has now been connected with a bridge here. I'll press Ctrl Z to undo those changes for now. As I mentioned earlier, we can select more faces by left clicking, and then we can shift left click other faces we want to select. But this isn't the only way of selecting multiple. We can also use Control left click, which will allow us to select things in a path. To explain this, I'll first left click one of these faces here, and if I hold down Control and select this face here, you can see it selected the faces in between as well. How this works is it selects the shortest path to the last face I've selected. So I've got this face here. If I hold down Control and left click this face here, it's going to fill in the gaps and select all of those faces from. Also, if I hold down Control and then left click this face here, you notice it's not going to wrap all the way around like you might expect, and that's because the shortest path from this face to this face is around this way, and the shortest path isn't going to choose this way because, as you can see, it's much longer. As you know, we can add loop cuts in Blender by holding down Control R and left clicking, and usually while you're modeling you're going to end up finding yourself having some more loops. Another thing I didn't show you in the last tutorial is when you press Control R, you can scroll the wheel on your mouse to increase the number of loop cuts you want to create. So I'm just going to left click it there and then right click to keep it in the center. You can also open up this loop cut and slide menu, and you can see the number of cuts can be altered here by adjusting this parameter. If you want to select one of these loops, rather than left clicking and then Control left clicking or Shift left clicking, an easier way to do this is to hold down the Alt key and then left click. And you can see that has selected that entire edge loop. This has worked because I am in edge select mode, which you can see up at the top here. If you were still in face select mode, it would just select an entire loop of faces instead. With vertex mode, it will select a loop of edges, just like in edge select mode. Of course, if you want to select more loops, you can hold down Shift and then Alt left click on another loop to select that one as well. I'm going to come over to my cube here and I'm going to add some loop cuts to it as well. So hold down Control R and I'm going to bring my mouse over my cube here and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel just to add some more loops. I added 6 there, and I'm going to do the same in the other direction too. I'll press Control R, hover my mouse over this way, scroll my mouse wheel, and then left click. And now you can see I've got a bunch of squares on the top of my object. Something you'll notice is if we want to select all of these faces on top, we can use a command called Shift Control Left. So I'll hold down Shift and then Control, and with those two keys held, I can just left click this opposite corner here, and you can see it will select that entirety of these faces. So this is a handy tool to select a lot of faces on a surface like this. I'm going to press 2 on the keyboard to go into edge select mode, and this is going to show you how we can select, rather than a loop with Alt left click, we can select a ring of edges going in the other direction by holding down Control Alt and then pressing left click. You can see I can select all the edges going around like this. I also found when I hold down the Alt GR key on my computer and left click here, it will automatically do the Control Alt left click for you. I'm not quite sure why that is, but that's a handy tool you can have if your keyboard has an Alt GR key. I'm just going to press 3 on the keyboard to go into face select mode, and I'm going to select this top face here. And if I press Control I, you can see that everything else will be selected. This tool is called Invert Selection, so you can think of it as Control I for invert. Like a lot of these selection tools, you can come up to this option at the top here called Select, and here you can find all of your options, and some of them even display the hotkey, which is really handy if you forget. You can see, for example, there's the Select All here, Select None, and the Invert, which we were just covering. So if you ever get lost, you can always come to this menu as well. If I turn on my X-ray again, up here, you can also toggle it with Alt-Z. I can left click and drag to box select all these faces here, and if I want to select the mirror of this, I can press Shift Control M, and you can see that that's now going to mirror my selection on the X-axis. If you want to change the axis, there's a box here that will appear called Select Mirror, and here I can choose in which way I want to select my mirror. So you can see if I put it to Y, nothing will change because we already have the mirrored Y axis faces selected. And Z would do the up and down. So I highly recommend playing around with this selection tool yourself to get more familiar with it. Another thing you can do as well is extend your selection by left clicking this box, and what that'll do is it'll keep your old selection and add the new selection to it. If you forget the hotkey, you can come up to the select menu and you can find select mirror here. I'll press Alt Z to turn off the X-ray. Next up, we have select random. So if I'll come to my select option here, and then here I can left click select random, you can see it's going to select a bunch of faces at random. This can be great if you want to maybe apply a material to a bunch of random faces, or if you wanted to create a random vertex group. If you have no idea what those things are, don't worry about it, we'll maybe talk about it in a later tutorial. Also, if I press 3 on the keyboard to make sure I'm in face select mode and press Alt left click on this set of faces here to select that loop, we can also come to select and choose check or deselect. You'll notice this will now deselect every face in between, and here a little box called check or deselect will appear, and I can left click to open it, and here I can make some adjustments to how this works. So for example, I can make it so for every 2 selected ones there's 1 unselected, and so on. I'm going to press Alt left click to select this face loop here. I'm going to press Alt A to deselect everything, and then I'm going to press Alt left click to select this loop here. If I want to select more or less, I can hold down Control and then press the plus key on your numpad if you have one. I don't have a numpad, so unfortunately I can't show you this hotkey, but if you still want to do it, you can come up to select, then under more or less, you can select more. And you'll notice that this is going to select the next 2 loops up, We also have the option to come to more or less and then choose select less, and now that's going to reduce our selection by those loops. I'm going to press Alt A to deselect everything, and finally the last form of selection we're going to cover today is the sharp edges selection. So I'll left click this select up here, and then I'm going to choose sharp edges. Since I'm in face select mode, you can notice it's going to select a lot more than necessary. So I can change to edge select mode by pressing 2 on the keyboard, press Alt A to deselect everything, and then press select and then choose sharp edges again. And now things are going to be working a lot more intuitively. Usually I find a sharpness of 30 or 60 will usually select most of the edges you're wanting to select. Keep in mind, if I go 90 or higher, it's not going to select anything else, and that's because it's calculating it based on the angle between each face, and the angle here between this sharp edge is about 90 degrees. So when we hit 90 degrees, it's going to stop considering that a sharp edge for that operation. And yeah, that just about covers the most used selection options you have in Blender when modeling. I will be making a part 2 on selection in Blender, but it's not exactly essential, so it'll be a little bit later down the line in this series. If you enjoyed today's video and want to follow along with this ongoing series, make sure to check out the playlist here where we're learning how to 3D model starting from being fresh with Blender. Apart from that, I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.